This episode is sponsored by MailChimp. Let's talk clustomers. A cluster is what happens when marketers fail to personalize their marketing, grouping customers with very different behaviors into one tangled mess. But with MailChimp, marketers can use real-time behavior data to personalize every email for every customer. Turn your clustomers into customers with Intuit MailChimp, the #1 AI-powered email marketing and automation platform, now with SMS. Based on December 2023 publicly available data on competitors' numbers of customers.
It's time appliances had a personality. Yours. Earn up to $3,000 on select appliances with the area's largest selection of cafe appliances. Discover customizable refrigerators, stoves, dishwashers, or see what's available in stock and ready for immediate delivery to your home. Visit Appliance Connection or online at www.applianceconnection.com today for the best deals in home appliances.
Welcome to this week's Harness Racing Alumni Show. I'm Freddie Hudson, and I'm here today with Trade Martin, Bob Marks, and Andy Cohen. This week's show is brought to you by Capital South, LLC, a Washington, D.C. lobby and public relations firm headed by Washington, D.C. top lobbyist Marty Irby. For more information, call or text 202-821-5686.
Once again, that number is
202-821-5686.
Capital South, LLC, Marty Irby.
The Harness Racing Alumni Show is the #1 harness racing podcast in North America. We have sponsorships and advertising spots available. For more information, email rrtrotten@outlook.com or visit ustrots.com. The statements and opinions of our guests are their personal opinions and beliefs, and it does not necessarily represent the opinions of the Harness Racing Alumni Show or of its host.
The Harness Racing Alumni Show with your hosts, Freddie Hudson and Trade Martin.
On this week's special show, Hall of Fame journalist John Berry will interview our own Hall of Famer Bob Marks on the breeding of the standardbred racehorses. Bob is one of the world's experts on the standardbred breeding. Over to you, John.
Well, thanks so much. And, it's an honor for me to be with you, Freddie, and, of course, Bob. We both go back many, many decades in the sport. And I envy Bob because his wonderful book, Way of Life, he's an author extraordinaire. We worked together at Hub Rail years and years ago. His yearling prognostications are legendary. He's a Hall of Famer going back 10 years. And, of course, I cannot forget the old Trotter Weeklies or Top Trotters, which got it all started many, many, many years ago while he was out east and I was in Chicago. But, Bob, it's an honor for me to talk to you today and be the one to do just a bit of an interview, getting your expertise, which is so vast in this business.
Thank you, John. Go right ahead.
Okay. What has been, in your eyes, the biggest change since you and I started in this business as a fan 65 years ago for me? And we go back to the Countess Adios days, and that should give you a little bit of a hint of what I'm thinking.
I remember Countess Adios very well. She was one of the all-time great fillies and mares, and she was the Adios half-sister to perhaps the greatest sire of all time, Meadow Skipper. But basically, the difference between then and now is pretty much what we've done as an industry is we've purified the gates. Back then, a horse could be by a trotting sire and he could be a pacer, or he could be we had a tremendous number of what you would call double-gated sires, horses like Worthy Boy, Victory Song, Darn Flashy. They could sire trotters or they could sire pacers. So consequently, the trainer had some deciding to do when he finally got a hold of the yearling, because theoretically, the yearling conceivably could have trotted or he could have paced, or possibly even done both. Today, what we've done today is we pretty well have purified that. You won't find a pacing bred horse within 5 generations in any of today's trotters other than Goo Goo Gaga, who somehow got himself in there. Now, as far as the pacers are concerned, you won't find a trotter. It's completely different than the days when the Horton Hanovers and the Egyptian Prides and the Mighty Tides, trotting bred pacers, could compete equally with the Adioses and Tar Heels of that era. But today's pacer, you can go back 5 generations. You won't find any trotting blood.
Wow. Well, back then when the 2-minute mile was king, and now the 150 mile is not even a king, and that's pretty scary speed, And so when you breed, let's just say you have a mediocre mare and you've got a mediocre stallion. What are you going to get? Are you going to get it? Is there any chance of getting a champion out of that? Can you overbreed? Can you underbreed? What's the scoop there?
Basically, you can always get a champion, although they're few and far between. I mean, certainly some beat somewhere. One of the all-time great pacers, and he may turn out to be even a greater sire of sires than Meadow Skipper was. And I won't be around to choreograph it or to catalog it, but he's phenomenal. But yet he was by Mach 3, who was just another sire, and out of a beach towel mare who was actually aging. And other than Jenna's Beach Boy, you don't find that much from Beach Towel, but yet Some Beach Somewhere is among the greatest horses of all time, and there are some that think he may have been the greatest horse of all time. So therefore, but when you're now talking about the breeding, yes, that can always happen. But on the same token, normally, if you breed a sea-level mare to a sea-level stallion, realistically the best you can hope for is a sea-level pacer or trotter. If you breed a C-level mare to a B-level stallion or an A-level stallion, which some might consider overbreeding, well, you still might get that C-level foal. But occasionally, you're going to get a B, or once in a blue moon, you might even get an A. But the chances of that happening are minimal if you keep breeding the C-level mare to the C-level stallion.
Mm-hmm. Years ago, I remember that Tar Heel was considered one of the great broodmare sires in this business. Is there such a thing as a dominant broodmare sire today at all?
Tar Heel was unique. He probably was the greatest pure broodmare sire of all time, mainly because just about every horse that ever had access to Tar Heel mares sooner or later got his greatest performers from Tar Heel mares. I mean, there's no better example than Dancer Hanover, who, other than the mare Romola Hanover, was a complete flop, but yet he gave us Romeo Hanover, an all-time great, and Romulus Hanover, an all-time great, and Romalie Hanover. So, but today, I don't necessarily, there was, generally speaking, a great sire in today's standards will be a great broodmare sire for the simple reason that he got the best maternal families to work with during his tenure. Consequently, now when it switches over and he's on the broodmare sire side, he's still working with an excellent maternal line.
Well, when you started in the business many years ago, and what it's come to today, what do you see are I guess you would call it the big differences between breeding then and breeding now?
I'm not so sure there are any. I think the fundamental rules that always apply. I mean, there are certain things you don't want to do. You don't want to double up on conformation flaws. I mean, basically, if the mare's got a flaw, you might not want to breed to a stallion that has the same flaw. But, it happens for argument's sakes. A perfect horse, however, you're not really trying to make a perfect horse, because a perfect horse might not be a fast horse. He may look great standing there. Muscles Yankee, for argument's sake, had a club foot, and yet he was one of the great sires of all time, and sired a horse named Muscle Hill, who many still consider probably the greatest trotter they've ever seen.
Interesting. When I go to the grocery store and I'm looking for a good sweet watermelon, I'm looking around seeing what they look like and everything, and then I think about how are you going to pick a yearling that looks great? And you think of people like Delvin Miller, No Foot, No Horse, and Dancer and Houghton, and Gene Regal from Ohio, and even the modern, as Murray Brown said, Casey Coleman can really pick them.
She's excellent.
What do these people look for when they're looking at a yearling to try and pick the best watermelon out of the bunch?
Well, I think the first thing you're doing is looking at the pedigree. And basically, after you've gone through the pedigree, now you're looking strictly at the conformation. It's not so much the perfect horse. It's as Abe Stoltzfus, who was one of the greatest that I've ever seen, in one area at what I would call negative conformation. Abe would look at the horse and he would simply say, no shot. Okay, why no shot? He won't stay sound. Why won't he stay sound? He'd point to some area over on the ankles, and he said, he's not going to stay sound. Other than modern art, I don't think he was ever wrong. I mean, if Abe said no, the odds are, the horse might have made it, but he would be a problem horse throughout his life. I mean, that's basically when, in terms of, looking at yearlings, you're looking at pedigree and you're looking at conformation. And basically, you're also looking at maternal families, and you pretty well want the horse to ascribe to the best of what that maternal family might be. In addition, some people say you want the horse to look like the sire. Other people say no. So there's a difference of opinion on that. Okay.
So the breeding process actually begins in research months and months before. Can you lead us from the time you get the reading the pedigrees to the time the breeding process takes place, and then over to the sales? We'd like to know about that.
In the breeding process, basically you never stop studying it because it's always changing. But like for argument's sake, at this stage of the game, if I see suddenly a horse, and a great example of that is a horse named Cattle Wash, who some people know and other people may not know, but I'm noticing he's got a lot of 2-year-olds out there, and they're pretty good. Well, you take one look at it, and, he's a son of Some Beat Somewhere. Well, at this stage of the game, Some Beat Somewhere may prove to be the greatest sire of stallion sons we've ever had, because all of his stallion sons, like Captain Treacherous and Huntsville, that have hit the stud, have been huge successes. We're also noticing that in Pennsylvania with he's not ill-fated, but he's not exactly the healthiest horse right now, Pappy Rob Hanover, who looks like he's a Some Beat Somewhere out of a rock and roll Hanover mare, and he looks like he's a sensational sire. Certainly that filly I just saw over at Pocono the other day, yet last night, Pappy Grad, she looks like she's an incredible filly.
Well, the question now that I have, with so many new stars coming on board, every single year, will that diminish some of the stars of the past and cause possibly a reduction in some stallion fees to some of the great champions of the last 2, 3, 4, 5 years?
Well, as for stallion fees, basically, that's always determined by public perception. If you can't get into the book, you raise the stallion fee. Basically, if if nobody really wants to breed to the horse, well, then simply you have to lower the stallion fee to make it at least somewhat accommodating.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we got new ones coming every single year, And, I understood when a 2-minute mile all of a sudden became 158 and then 157 and 3. But now when you're going in the 147 range, there are so many horses that have beaten that over the last few seasons. And it's just been, well, the whole breed has changed from one of durability to one of speed. I'm not so sure that that's a great thing, because I think it's going to shorten some of the racing careers, not only because you want to get them into stud, but because of the wear and tear on the body. And, of course, that has an acute effect on racing in the future with less number of horses in the fields. And I fear about that in the future.
I can understand that. Basically, speed is excessive. There's no question about it. I'm not so sure that there's really any greater number of horses entering stud now than there used to be. I mean, basically, you're talking about the divisional leaders, like the top colts or the top aged horses who will eventually get their chance to be a stud. In that sense, in that sense of the word, I don't know that we're retiring them any earlier than we used to, because basically, the Brett Hanovers back then, they retired. Well, Brett did race at 4, but and Jeff Corrales tried to keep horses racing at 4 via his Corral rule, and but on the same token, I'm not so sure it's really all that different than it used to be.
Mm-hmm. When you did yearling prognostications years and years ago, I'm sure that you did exhaustive research. If you did them today, would you change the way you do your yearling prognostications?
Oh, actually, I wouldn't even attempt it today, because similar to the gentleman that just decided not to run for president, as approaching 82, I'm a shadow of what I was. Consequently, I wouldn't even attempt to do some of those mental equations that I might have attempted back then.
Yes, but you're only 28 Celsius. We're not 82 Fahrenheit, so we turn those numbers around for you.
Thank you so much.
But it's an art, I'll tell you that. You never know what you're going to get when they come in that sales ring, and you've got a minute or 90 seconds maybe to make a decision, and sometimes it's $1 million decision. So I'll tell you, it's an art that, well, it's just incredible art to try and to pick the next one that's going to be on the top of the list. We got all these divisions, and there's only one that makes it to the top of the list. And if you're down at number 5 or 6 or 7, pacing in 147 or something like that, it's not good enough these days. It's crazy.
It may be, but those that excel at it, they really work at it. I mean, they'll look at a horse maybe 3 or 4 different times. I remember back at Peretti Farms, they would come in all the time and ask to see the yearlings, ask to see them out in the field, which I hated to do, because you never knew what was going to happen once you throw them out in the field. They could conceivably hurt themselves. But on the same token, you don't blame. In fact, it's advisable to go see how, especially a trotter, to go see how he can move out there. And most of the great trainers, they're very diligent in how they approach the craft, and they spend quite a lot of time looking at the horse, looking again, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. They spend a lot of time. So in some cases, the success is not necessarily accidental. I mean, it's because they're good at it.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, John and Bob. I just wanted to bring up something. Back at Roosevelt, George Morton Levy had initiated the Founders Plate, which was if you won the division at 2 and 3 and 4, at that time you would get a $50,000 bonus that the split was like $25,000 to the trainer driver and $25,000 to the owner. Do you remember that, Bob?
I remember it very well. And one of the things in the old days that I always applauded was the old HTA series. That was strictly for 4-year-olds. And because it was considered back then that the horse needed to be at least halfway through his 4-year-old season before he could tackle the seasoned free-for-allers. So they made this series, Barnstorm series, where they would go to different tracks strictly for 4-year-olds. And great horses like Overtrick didn't, because he was that good where he just went right into free-for-all. But many other top 4-year-olds did that. And then they would gravitate to to a free-for-all. And the Founders Plate certainly was a very welcome addition to that particular series.
Correct. We're running a little long on time here, so I'm going to close the show out. John, I want to thank you so much for joining us and joining the team this week. You did a great job with Bob.
Well, I appreciate it, and it was an honor for me to be with all of you. And whenever you need anything, call on me again. I'm always happy to be with you.
Now, over to Andy for this week's Keeping Pace Weekly Update.
Thanks, Fred. Yeah, I'm going to try to focus the next Keeping Pace column at the Pollock Report on this big brewing story out of Canada, out of Ontario, where the longtime Canadian Trainer of the Year, Richard Moreau, has been suspended for a DPO positive on his big-time horse, Funtime Bayama, who has been sold to Andrew Harris. There's a lot of moving parts, and I'm going to try to get into it for Monday's column. Back to you, Fred.
Thank you, Andy. The Harness Racing Alumni Show is the #1 harness racing podcast in North America and is listened to worldwide on multiple platforms, including Spreaker, iHeartRadio, USTrots.com, HarnessLink, Google Podcasts, and many others. To our audience, thanks for listening, and please join us again next week.
The Harness Racing Alumni Show.